We have Captain Deane Lambros.
I think that any young, enterprising mate wants to learn should be soaking up and working and looking at all of those different perspectives that those other captains have. What we would do in a week, 5 trips in a week, is what most do in a season.
So what was the first, hard lesson you learned? I mean, what was the first thing when maybe you got yelled at a little bit?
So the first lesson was, I'm just on my own. There's no one here to really watch me.
Well, I mean, that's kind of a tough segue for this guy.
Welcome to another episode of the On the Water podcast. Beautiful.
Let's go!
Everglades Boats is an industry leader in premium offshore fishing boats. Founded in 1997 by boating industry legend and former Boston Whaler executive Bob Doherty, Everglades revolutionized the boat building industry with the invention of the ram cap process for one-piece unsinkable hulls. Respected for its renowned hull ride, Everglades builds center console and hybrid boats from 25 to 45 feet that make a statement about the status and savvy of their owner. Everglades has received numerous industry awards and achieved an unparalleled reputation for superior safety, performance, and quality. For more information about Everglades boats, stop by your local dealer or visit evergladesboats.com. Everglades Boats, built for beyond. Welcome back to another episode of the On the Water podcast. I'm Jimmy Fee. I have our assistant editor, Matt Haeffner, with me. And our guest this week is Captain Deane Lambros of the Canyon Runner. He's going to talk tuna fishing. He's going to talk what it's like being the captain of a big offshore operation like Canyon Runner. But before that, we want to bring it back to the surf before we head offshore and talk about probably my favorite topwater, which isn't the dock. It's the pencil popper.
I don't know if I could agree with you that it's my favorite topwater. I kind of like the Polaris-style poppers, Super Strikes, and Gibbs and stuff like that, but there is something about the way a bass just inhales a pencil.
The pencil popper is a very cool... It's got a great history. The Polaris does, too.
Yeah.
Like the Gibbs... So
there's a place for both.
There is. There absolutely is. And when I first started topwater fishing, I was always using the Polaris. So a Polaris popper, Super Strike, they call it the little neck popper. It's got a giant cupped mouth, a narrower neck, and then a big bulbous back end that helps casting. The pencil popper is much different. It's a tapered design where you have a very narrow nose with the line tie, a slight cup in most cases to catch the water and throw it, and then that flares out. And the idea is that it casts well. Now, it's pretty widely accepted that Stan Gibbs invented the pencil popper. Yep. I actually have a little excerpt. It's been a while since I brought one of my books and did a little reading. Oh yeah, by Zeno Roman.
I love that book.
The Art of Surf Casting with Lures. This is one of those must reads. Even it's 20, might be 20 years old now, but a lot of the information holds up. It's still good. But he has on pencil poppers. As we get into this, here's the opening to that section in the Art of Surf Casting with Lures. As he got older, legendary Massachusetts plug builder Stan Gibbs was frustrated that he could not reach the fish younger and stronger surf casters were reaching. So he designed a plug that would outcast all plugs. According to legend, his frustration gave birth to the first pencil popper that has evolved into the lure known today as the Gibbs Canal Special. So that was kind of it. Stan Gibbs, his testing ground was the Cod Canal.
Right.
So a lot of those designs that he made kind of came from there. And another thing I heard about the pencil popper lure is that, what bait fish do you think it imitates?
I would say it imitates like a frantic bunker on the surface. That's the closest thing.
Exactly. If you've seen a bunker flipping around, they have that kind of telltale tail kick where it's like a...
splashy, frantic. Yeah.
So that's what I always assumed. That's what most people think. Now, I've heard... Man, I can't even remember where I heard this, but somebody was talking about pencil poppers and the origin of them. They said that he actually made them to imitate whiting.
So I have heard that as well.
So silver hake
makes sense.
Were much more abundant bait fish back in the 1950s or 1960s when Stan Gibbs was designing his plugs in the canal, and so they were, you were more likely to see stripers blasting whiting out of the water than you would pencil poppers. So what was your own introduction to pencil poppers, Matt?
I would say the first one I probably ever had was like a cheap cotton cordell, and once I found out you could load them with water, that kind of became what I tried to do, at least on the beaches. And I did it in a very rudimentary way where I would I didn't measure the water going into them or anything. I would kind of take like a drill bit and just drill into the back of it, load it with as much water as I could, replace the belly hook with a single hook on the rear, kind of like if you were fishing for bluefish, and just fish it off the beach that way. But, seal it back up with some epoxy that you use for bucktail jigs or flies or whatever, and just hope it holds. And eventually the water kind of evaporates out of it, but, you can always re-drill it if you need to. And that was the first one I ever owned, was like cheap cotton cordels like that.
So those cotton cordels, they've been around for a long time. So you had Stan Gibbs created the design of the pencil popper. Then cotton cordel came in and mass-produced a plastic version of it that's still around today. I admit it, I don't think I've ever used one as a topwater, a cotton cordel pencil popper. So what guys in the canal will do is they'll drill one out, take a small size, and I don't remember the exact size bird shot, load it up, pack it with as much bird shot as you can, and fish it as a jig. And first off, it casts better than any other jig you're going to cast. It sinks quickly, and when it hits bottom and you lift it up, it has a very kind of erratic, like it'll sweep one way and then do a little flutter back down. For years, that was the hot jig in the Cape Cod Canal, was a loaded cordel, and some tackle shops still sell them preloaded. Ed Giordano in our office here, he's one of our on the editorial staff with us. His biggest ever striper, I think, was a 50-incher. He caught on a cotton cordel, loaded cotton cordel
in the canal. Mm-hmm. He's a canal guy. He knows what he's doing down there.
He does. He most certainly does. But yeah, so that's the cotton cordel. My introduction to them was my first trip to Montauk, and at some point I'll tell the whole story of that trip, but this will give you an idea of how it went. Like, we were sitting, it was me and my mom. I think I was 15 or 16.
Start to any good Montauk trip.
Oh yeah, and we were sitting in Turtle Cove. You've been to Montauk?
Yes.
So Turtle Cove, it's kind of rocky. It's like this cobbly rocks. We have a beach blanket spread out, and we are sitting on the beach blanket on like the most uncomfortable. But I don't know. It was like her vacation, like her and my dad. Like they're like, well, I begged them to go to Montauk in October, and they took me there, and it was a nice Columbus Day weekend. And they laid out, I was like, there's beaches there, but we have to fish the point. So they lay out the beach blanket on the horrible, like, cobbly rocks of Turtle Cove. And we're sitting there, and I think I caught a fish in the morning, and I was thrilled by it, absolutely thrilled. And then nothing had happened in the afternoon. And then two guys walked down, and they are just clad in everything that the surf casters of 2000 or 2001 had. You know, they had the belt, they had the gaff on the belt, they had the Bronco surf top. Like, these guys are ready to go to war. And nobody's catching anything. They come down and they're throwing these plugs. At the plug didn't strike me, but the way they fished it did. They took the rods, kind of jammed it between their legs, put one hand maybe a foot above the reel seat, and started just absolutely whipping it like they were, like it owed them money.
Yeah.
And I'd never seen anybody fish a plug like that. And my instinct is to be like, look at these guys. That's not how you work a popper. Yeah. And then all of a sudden, I just see one of the rod loads up, and then the other one. And these guys pulled fish out of seemingly dead water in the middle of the day using these pencil poppers. And after that, I changed my tune real quick.
I'm sure.
I think I went to Johnny's, and I bought my first couple pencil poppers there. They were Gibbs. I got a yellow and a blue, and those were the first ones I had. It took me a couple years to really start fishing them and catching on them, but that was kind of an eye-opener.
I think also, like, since then you're describing, I think rod construction has played a big part in, like, fishing pencil poppers better and making it more productive. I don't know. There's so much new technology in rod blanks these days that, like, you want a little bit of a stiffer rod, but it can't be too stiff, right? It has to have a little bit of give to it and be a little bit soft enough to kind of work that pencil, because otherwise you're just pulling it out of the water every time. Back
when it was more glass and fiberglass rods and monofilament, I'm pretty sure these guys were using mono, which definitely played a role in it too, because that
stretchier. And
around then, 2000, 2001, you were still about 50-50 with guys using mono on the surf. I remember my reels were all spooled up with 20-pound test monofilament then. I think I got to braid a couple years later. But you would need that exaggerated motion, even with a relatively fast rod, to get that thing dancing. So the reason you're working your rod like that, even today, it's kind of a fast twitch. You're trying to create like a short pull with the rod and then throw slack at it. And it doesn't quite walk the dog. It's more of like a windshield wiper motion, where
that's a good way to put it.
The back end of the plug almost stays in place and just twitches back and forth like that.
It wags.
Yeah, wag. There you go. And it wags, and it's something about it just calls up. It's a great fish finding plug. If you're in a new area and you want to find their fish, they may not always eat it, but they'll swirl behind it.
Yeah.
So what are some of your best catches on pencil poppers?
I would say probably like the 20-pounder that I caught off the North Fork of Long Island was probably like my most memorable because it was like the biggest bass I'd caught on a pencil, and that was probably, I don't know, 5 years ago at this point. It was like right around the time of the pandemic, and it was like, I don't know, I never really fished pencils too much on the beaches on the South Shore, but when you get those calmer conditions up on the North Shore and a lot of those boulder fields out on the North Fork where I kind of like grew up fishing, they just have this ability to raise fish. And I know like a lot of guys have now changed out the pencils in exchange for spooks because they also raise fish just as well depending on the conditions. But I think that was probably my most memorable catch.
Yeah,
the 20-pounder.
I had some pretty good ones in the early 2000s. Like once I saw those guys at Montauk, that began this kind of like where using pencil poppers exploded. Not that instance in particular, but what happened fishing wise around then. You had a group in New Jersey that fought to outlaw the reduction netting of bunker in state waters, and they were successful. And you saw this kind of bunker boom within 3 miles of of New Jersey, and what that led to was in, let's say late May to early July, you had these great runs where bunker would sit on the beach, sit offshore. Boats would catch them all day. Then in the afternoon, if you got some west winds, the bunker and bass would charge the beach, and guys would be waiting on all these jetties in Ocean and Monmouth County to throw pencil poppers. So before that, you had a couple options. You had your Gibbs pencil poppers.
Right.
He had the regular one, like which was a fully rounded, then a flat bottomed one that was this canal special.
Style, right.
Then you had the cotton cordels. But as the fishing got better, everyone started making pencil poppers. I remember one of the hottest ones, the best ones to get was the old Yozuri Surface Cruiser, which that one was made of plastic. I think even then it was might have been a $25 or a $30 plug, which was a lot for a lure back then. And they would break. Like they'd hit a rock or you'd catch too many fish on them, and the plastic on them, it was a different plastic because I broke enough of them. Oh my God, you'd hit a rock on one in the middle of the Blitz and it would split in half and you'd freak out. But it worked so much. They brought it back a couple years ago, maybe 10 years ago now, and it's not as good. It's a different plastic. It's a different material. It doesn't cast as well. But those original Yozuri Surface Cruisers are great. Mike Gleason from Tack Waterman, he posts a picture of, he's got a stash still
of the old ones,
and he breaks them out every once in a while, and I'm always very jealous. I have 2 left. One's split but still fishable, and the other one is still intact and pretty fishable. But then you had all these custom plug builders making them, and because it was big baits and because you're on the jetties and you want to make a big commotion, they were generally large pencil poppers, 8-inch 3-ouncers, so pretty big ones. Plugcaster was a big one back then. D-Mag, Dennis came around a couple years later. So all these, there'd be a hot pencil popper build. Like you had to have the pencil popper. And looking back on that, like it's almost silly. Like it is a plug that, as long as it's weighted right and shaped right, they're all gonna
it's gonna catch fish.
Yeah, they're all gonna do what you need them to do. But some guys definitely had the hot hand in that pencil popper scene. Then they kind of took a new evolution in about 2008 to 2009.
Mass production of like plastic pencils, kind of, or
no. So what happened was you had these great mackerel runs in the Cape Cod Canal. So whenever you had these big runs, guys would kind of shape what they had. They'd want to customize it to their own fishery. And you had the Gibbs Canal specials. You had all these big Jersey plugs, and they worked okay. But if the fish were out of reach and the mackerel are much smaller than the bunker, sometimes you wouldn't get bit or wouldn't reach them. So people started making these smaller ones. And the first, maybe he wasn't the first, but he was the first popular one, was Left Hook Lures. And he made a compact, a 6-inch pencil popper that weighed 2.5 or 3 ounces. Guppy Lures was another one. Yeah. And Guppy Lures was actually kind of the evolution of Hog Hunter. I don't know the full story off the top of my head here, but they bought the machinery, and that's a great pencil popper. Guppy Lures.
Is it the Guppy Jobo pencil? Yes. I have a couple of those. I really like them.
Those, they cast well. Yeah. They're really easy to get working, and they catch a ton of fish. But that was when people started making these smaller, compact pencil poppers that had the flattened bottom, so you would cast, and they would sink like a stone. But when you have the canal current moving,
it ends up planing up to the surface.
They get to the surface, and you can fish them. And that's when you learn like the difference between, because I caught a little bit of that northern New Jersey pencil popper bite, and I had moved up here in 2008 and caught a lot of the canal pencil popping, and it was a very different style. So what I saw the guys doing in Montauk really matched what the guys were doing in Jersey, whipping the rod, making that lure, kind of beat the water into a froth. in the canal, you were better off doing something much more subtle. So
The current assists you in a way. I mean, if you have to work it a little bit less when you have that sweeping current, whether it's moving left or right, it doesn't really matter.
exactly. And the guys would kind of make fun of they're like, you could point out the Jersey guys a mile away because they're the ones still going crazy with the pencil poppers, getting them working. When it was more of a kind of the Sharpies up here, it was a much more subtle action. And so that it's not making a splashing, it's just slowly walking along the surface. And if you watch a mackerel coming across the canal, it does leave that little V wake, even when it's panicked. And that was, so I have, like, if you go from my first pencil popper to the one I bought most recently, which was, I think it was probably not even technically a pencil popper, but a 3T by Joe Pava, which is another evolution of it. These long cast pencil poppers where you have a really exaggerated bulbous back section and then a very narrow tip.
Is that like that bazooka style kind of pencil we're talking about?
Yeah. Now you probably, the guys who make them probably would say they're not pencil poppers, but it is kind of in that. They're
realm.
cousins of the pencil popper, at least.
Still has the slightly, it has that tapered shape and it a little bit, more exaggerated, I'd say, and it still has that cupped mouth. So I'd say it falls under the umbrella of pencils.
Yeah, it's in the family, even if it's a distant relative. You did a great story in our magazine a couple months ago.
It was the March 2025 issue, I think.
On pencil poppers. Yeah. Share some of the tips you shared in that on fishing them and.
Yeah, it was basically like if you're getting into pencil popping and you want to kind of build a collection, you don't have to go for the most expensive pencils right off the bat. It's starting with things like Cod and Cordell's and the Gibbs pencils, things that are readily available at most tackle shops, and they're going to catch fish. Like, there is something to be said about like whether. I don't know. Do you have a preference, like wood or plastic pencil poppers, or do you feel like there's a place for both? Because there's sometimes where like I've only caught fish on wood pencils, and then when you add a little bit of a rattle for something like the Tsunami Talking Popper, for example, it ends up calling the fish up or not getting bit. For like last year, there was a great bite on the south side of Cape Cod where I was looking for bluefish, and I would go down there every day after work, and if it wasn't a rattling pencil, the stripers weren't hitting it. It was kind of strange. Like I would throw Wally's pencils and Guppy Jobos and stuff like that, and they wouldn't get touched. And then take out a Tsunami Talking Popper, the HD, or XD, sorry, the extra distance, and that was like the key to getting bit. So I don't know. I feel like there's a place for both, but I don't know what was the deciding factor. Whether it was water quality and that little rattle brought them up to the surface, or if it was the action of it. I think they work pretty much the same.
Yeah, the Talking Popper is a great one.
Yeah.
I have them, and it's funny, which is probably not the best thing, but I save my plastic pencils for bluefish when bluefish are around because they're not going to chew up the wood.
True.
They're more indestructible, and also I feel like I miss some bluefish on wooden pencil poppers because their teeth jam into the wood, and you can't.
Definitely a problem.
And I remember I had one from a Montauk Blitz that actually had bluefish teeth embedded in the wood. Like it was.
That's wild.
Oh, dude, I had that plug for years. I retired it and then brought it out of retirement and lost it. Because it was so cool seeing all the teeth marks in it. So that's the reason I use plastic. But when I was throwing the Talking Popper more for stripers, it definitely caught. And I think the rattle's a big part of that.
Yeah.
Having some sound in there, that's a big part of the dock, too, being successful.
For sure.
That big
rattle.
knocker in there.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't... The nice part about wooden pencils is they're kind of infinitely customizable. So everybody's going to make them a little different. There's going to be some better for some situations. And so that's why I tend to go toward wooden pencil poppers if I'm targeting stripers. For bluefish, it's usually a plastic Talking Popper or what's one of the other ones?
I would say like the North Bar Flying Squid is a great bluefish one. But if we have stripers on squid on the south side, like that's also a great popper for those.
So the Flying Squid,
a little different in terms of like it loses that cupped mouth, still has that tapered design, but it's a much longer pencil.
So Larry and Rob Koch, who was on the who worked with North Bar back then when they were coming out with this, they wanted to make a pencil popper that would fly farther, that would cast farther. And one of the things that costs you distance with a pencil popper is if you cast it and instead of going straight like a dart, it starts to wobble and whiffle a little bit, and then it's going to cut down. You're going to get 75 to 50% of your casting distance out of it. So what these guys did is they created a pencil popper that has a nose that has 4 wings on it. And they sent up a couple of the prototypes here, and they're like, let us know how they cast. I remember they arrived in the mail, and he goes, these are the only ones we have. And I remember being like so terrified. I snap off a lot of lures on casts, but they all remained intact. And they eventually then did put them into production. And that face shape on them gives it kind of a unique, it like chops the water up. It's a lot of commotion. I know they're very popular with like P. Jig and people who go down south catch jacks on them, catch sharks on them.
Spinner sharks on them, which is pretty crazy.
So they are, they like that because they can cast them far and they create a big commotion. I've caught bluefish on them. I've caught stripers on them up here. Not one of my go-to. Like I tend to go.
There's like very specific instances where I'll be like, that's the one I'm going to throw, But generally, going back to kind of what this column was, it was, a basic overview of pencils and kind of building your own, like starting to build a pencil popper collection. And it was going for the ones that are more accessible and kind of giving you an average weight range to, start with. If you're casting off the beaches, whether it's the South Shore of Long Island or, I don't know, the South Shore of Massachusetts, even the beaches of Rhode Island or Jersey, 2.5 ounces, 3 ounces is generally what you're looking for. Whereas for the canal, I know, like the guys at the Red Top will tell you, like a 5 ounce plus pencil popper is what you want.
That's an awful heavy pencil.
You
popper.
want to be able to cast it. I mean, where you had Ron Ara in here recently, we're talking about casting distance, and you want to be able to reach those fish. If you're standing on the mainland side or Cape side, and there's fish going off on the other side, they got Tinker Max pressed up against the rocks. You want one of those heavier, compact pencils that's going to reach it, but still have that similar profile that you're looking for.
Yeah, that's kind of so. What pencil poppers I'm bringing depends on one. Am I in the canal or am I on an open beach?
Right.
And for the open beaches, I like 7-inch or 8-inch pencil poppers and not super heavily weighted, like a 7-inch 2-ouncer, an 8-inch, maybe 3-ouncer. In the canal, I like more compact. I like 6-inch pencil poppers, 6.5-inch, and they're 7-incher that weighs 3 ounces or 6-incher that weighs 2.5, and that's usually the dividing line for me. I love those small pencils. But a lot of times on the, if you're on an open beach, you just don't have enough water movement to keep them on the surface and retrieve them at the speed that you want to. We talked about how you want to whip the rod when you're working the pencil popper. As you're doing that, it's kind of a slow reel. All you're doing is it's like a bit of a turn for each twitch of the rod just to take in enough line of that slack. So it's moving. It's almost walking in place. It's just kind of inching its way forward. And if you miss a fish, to hook them, you just keep working it.
Yeah.
Like if a fish comes up, boils behind it, just keep it moving. And if it loses interest, I found stop it cold and give it like a longer pause until you can't possibly pause any longer.
Right.
Like until you're like, I got to move this thing again, and then move it. And that a lot of times, like if they miss it and they lose interest, but they're still in the area, killing it and stopping it and then letting everything settle and starting the retrieve again. This works if you have a floating pencil. With a sinking pencil, it's not quite as, it's a little different because the plug's going to sink down, but sometimes they'll eat it as it sinks. And then when you resume the retrieve, it starts trying to get away from the fish again. That's when they hit.
That's not exclusive to pencils either, like stopping it after you see a fish boil behind it or miss the plug or, whack it into the air or something like that. Because I know with the dock, for example, or any walk the dog style topwater for that matter, if a fish boils on it and misses it, or let's say tail whacks it into the air, that's when you just want to let it sit still on the surface. You can count to 5 sometimes and that fish will still come back. Or if there's other followers, I mean, you don't know if it's the same fish that's, you could have 3 or 4 fish nosing that plug. And the same can be said for super strike plugs, the little neck popper. You let that sit on the back of a wave. It would happen back in May when we were on that bunker bluefish bass bite, let that popper sit on the backside of a wave after a fish boils on it. And for some reason, that's when they seem to want to hit it, when it's dead still on the back of a wave. Like, I don't know what it was, but my first fish, when it landed in the water, I was working it, and then, sure enough, stopped it, let it sit on the backside of one of those waves. We had a northwest wind blowing in some big surf onto the Cape side of Buzzards Bay, and sure enough, a big bluefish came up and hit it, and that was very exciting. I hadn't seen a bluefish eat like that in a while.
So that Blitz, we'll talk briefly about that, then we're going to kick this over to Deane, because we're running a little long here. But that was a great Blitz. That was so far to date, June 10th, the highlight of my surf fishing season was that Blitz. And what was funny is we got down there after work, and there were some massive bluefish in there.
Yeah.
And I was I was foaming at the mouth to get some of these big blues because, I mean, they were 15, 16 pounds. There might have been some that were flirting with 20.
Right.
That's like saying...
It's an enormous blue.
That's a giant bluefish, but there were some very big ones. We weighed one, and it was 16 pounds. So my first 3 fish casting into this melee were slot stripers.
Yeah,
and
I remember that.
I hate to say I'm ever disappointed with a striper, but when I'd be fighting the striper, you would still be tied into a giant bluefish, and there would be, let's say the bass is 30 inches long. There'd be bluefish that were 6 inches longer than it, just like following
3 or 4 following it in right up to the jetty rocks.
Oh man, like how did the bass possibly beat the bluefish? And these happened 3 in a row, and then I got it right, got a bluefish, and all was well in the world again. But that was a treat, that Blitz. You were using the cupped mouth popper. I had a small pencil popper.
So you had I noticed you had on the the Tatey.
Eventually, that's what I got my bluefish on.
So what would you kind of define that plug as? Because it's similar to like the Roberts Ranger in a way, where it's really not a pencil. It's kind of just a lure you drag across the surface in a way.
Yeah,
but it still has that commotion that a pencil can create.
So that is the bucktail jig of the West I don't know if it's Tatey or Tatty.
Tatty, whatever.
But TADY.
Yeah.
Casting. It's a casting iron. So what that is, it's a diamond-shaped piece of, I think it's usually tin. I don't think it's lead. What I was using was a Shimano version of it. Okay. So it was plastic, and it had some of the Shimano lure technologies. It had the spring with the weight inside that made it cast farther. But your Kleenex brand, like the big brand, is the Tady's. And that's... it's tin. It's a different type of metal than lead, painted and coated, and you cast out, and as you retrieve it, it does kind of a...
Swim a little bit.
Yeah, swims and kicks, and they use it for tuna out there. They use it for yellowtail.
That's right, I remember that.
And out here, they tried to make a push here. I met the rep when he was coming out along, hitting shops here, and it just never caught on. Like, you can go to tackle shops around Cape Cod now, and you see those jigs in the discount bins. Meanwhile, they sell like hotcakes out on the West Coast. Yeah. Everybody needs them, and you need maybe it's their pencil popper because everybody's got different colors, different sizes and styles. And here, man, if a West Coast guy wants to load up, go to Falmouth Bait and Tackle. You can get a bunch of these for $3 out of the bargain bin. But maybe I don't know. Maybe it's time to break them out again for the bluefish, for the bluefin tuna.
It might be. I have a few of those Roberts Rangers that I'd like to get a couple of fish on.
Don't lump the Roberts Rangers in there. That is a completely different...
Well, it's not a metal, right.
But those were designed, I think they were designed on the Vineyard. And the original designer of those was very sensitive about people just calling them bluefish lures. Like they did catch big stripers as well.
Sure, yeah.
But because of their design, they had a single hook on there, and you just kind of cast out and rip them back in. That people defaulted to them for bluefish, great bluefish lures, but they always wanted to remind you, these catch stripers too. Don't diminish our plugs here. But anyhow, Matt, hopefully you and I will get another Blitz before the season ends.
Yeah, it's been a slower topwater season since that whole Blitz that we got.
It's been a slower season in general since then. I peaked early this year, and I certainly hope it's not all valleys till October.
There's plenty to look forward to.
But on that note, here's Captain Deane talking offshore, and thanks for checking in. Besides catching fish, the top priorities on a summer fishing trip are staying comfortable and staying protected from the sun. The AFTCO Aero Mesh collection has you covered on 2 of those fronts, with the super breathable, super lightweight proprietary fabric that allows a full range of motion while providing up to UPF 50 sun protection. These shirts are available in short sleeve and long sleeve button downs, as well as short sleeve, long sleeve, and hooded performance shirt styles. The Aero Mesh hooded fishing shirt is perfect for summertime fluke and tuna trips, where the stain resistant material ensures that you can still wear it on family beach days without wearing the evidence of your last offshore harvest. To see the Aero Mesh collection, visit aftco.com today.
What's up, everybody? I'm Anthony DeCicci. We have Captain Deane Lambros from Canyon Runner joining us today for a podcast. Arch nemesis Jimmy Fee's back in the house, and we're going to be talking a little bit of everything. Going to venture pretty far offshore, I'm willing to bet. What's going on, Captain Deane? How are you?
Most likely. I'm well. How are you?
Doing very well. Give us the backstory. How did you get into fishing? How old were you? What was that first, oh man, I need to be doing this as much as possible?
So, I was thinking about that on the ride up today, how long we've been trying to put this together. This has been probably 18 months or so, and I think I first met you folks, 7, 8 years ago or so, all on a fishing trip, which is kind of fun, right? While we're talking fishing and at all. But Backstory, from the closest I can recall, I've always been into the water, and I've always wanted to work on a boat. Never did I imagine the arc of fishing would be how I would do that. I've just loved the water, and fishing probably when I was 10, 12 years old, started catching stripers in Martha's Vineyard. We had some family friends that had a place there, and one of our friends started to take me fishing, and I just thought it was awesome.
So are you from New England originally?
From Connecticut.
Okay.
Yeah. Then started to do some shark tournaments, some local tournaments, started fishing with my stepfather, and that's how I got into it and got a job working on the Canyon Runner, and that's started from the bucket scrubber position. And kind of funny story, my very first project I ever did on the Canyon Runner was a fiberglass project, and the very last project I ever did on the Canyon Runner was a fiberglass project.
It's full circle.
Exactly.
So how'd you link up with Canyon Runner in the first place? How'd you get that first boat scrubber job?
Shot him an email,
Yeah.
like any young millennial would do, or so shot him an email, and they had availability, and I wanted to learn fishing. So it's just interesting.
Just sending out that initial query. Like I used to do that. I worked at a tackle shop in Ocean City, and I remember I'd have summers off coming up, and I would just shoot everybody emails. You know, I wanted to work in fishing. You know, either be a mate on a party boat. I ended up taking the tackle shop job, and you know, you learn. So it's such a crash course. Just taking that first. Like you said, you weren't doing anything glamorous. You certainly weren't at the helm at your first job there, but you learned and you worked your way up, and man, it's how soon did you become the captain?
About 4 years. You need a captain's license to be the technical second captain, first mate on those overnight trips due to some regulations. So I had a captain's license, and I got very lucky at Canyon Runner because we had 3 different sort of mentors in that business and 2 captains with the 2 different boats. And so I had Adam, who I learned like the business side. I had Captain Phil, who taught me a lot about boat work. And then I had Captain Mark de Blasio, who I fished with pretty much exclusively for 3 years. And so I was able to get 3 different sides and viewpoints. And I think that any young, enterprising mate wants to learn should be soaking up and working and looking at all of those different perspectives that those other captains have. And you see the best guys in this industry generally all have a resume that's extensive, but they worked for 1 or 3 really great top guys, and
You had them all under one roof.
they ascend quick.
Yeah.
And what's nice about Canyon Runners, you're just going. The volume is incredible.
I mean, to build up the experience, that amount of experience in a relatively short amount of time. I mean, Canyon Run would start their canyon trips in May most years.
Yeah, so mid-May, June, mid-May, and there were times where we'd go all the way into January. Not necessarily just with Canyon Run, but you might do some commercial fishing. There's so much opportunity in there, and so you go so often. We were averaging 50 to 65 trips a year. You just get an incredible volume. It's very quick. What we would do in a week, 5 trips in a week, is what most do in a season.
Yeah.
So it's very quickly you get the reps in.
So you shot him an email. Was it just like, hey, I like to fish. I'd like to work for you guys?
They were hiring, and they
Yeah.
called it a second mate's position, but
Yeah.
it was just a bucket scrubber, dock run, which that operation at that time was going a lot of back-to-back. It's changed a little bit because you're catching a lot more fish at night. So that's where that position came in. You did a trip a week, and then you were at the dock for dock support.
So what was the first, hard lesson you learned? I mean, what was the first thing when maybe you got yelled at a little bit on the boat?
Well, there's a couple things going on there. I'm like 19 years old.
Yeah.
And 19 is when most people are either graduated high school, maybe they're in college, maybe they're not. But you're about to ascend on how you're going to grow up, right? And you don't even know it yet, but in your 20s, you grow up. So the first lesson was, I'm just on my own. There's no one here to really watch me, right? Or to give you guidance. And you start learning lessons quickly. And you'll learn to sort of weed through the nonsense of it and pick up on, you have to use some intellect, or some intuition, and you just hope that you land on your feet. And so much of that job when you're starting out is just being available to, sure, I'll stay the extra hour. I'll meet you an hour earlier. I'll go check the boat. I'll walk down with that captain. And most captains just want to see you willing to work and not ask too many why questions, but ask enough to show that you have some interest, right? And you don't want to be that kid that's just in your ear telling you everyone how good they are, right?
Yeah, I'm sure there's a lot of those.
Let the
especially this
captain
day
tell
and
you
age.
about his resume and just keep quiet, keep your head down.
Yeah. So you mentioned you had 3 captains. You went to school, obviously got your captain's license. It sounded like you took the best or a combination of the best of what each of those captains might have been strongest at and made it your own. Do you have, any recollection of like, all right, I got this strength of mind definitely from this captain and so on and so forth, and how does that break out?
Yeah, so each one of those individuals had different philosophies on fishing, right? Some of them took fishing as, let's just do the minimum to get the trip in. Some of them went all the way to the maximum of everything has to be double checked. Every day is a tournament day. If you take a blend of both, you'll be an average charter fisherman. But philosophically, I try and look at fishing that you should make a system that is pretty dumbed down. Your mates shouldn't have to think too much. You shouldn't burn the mates out. When you're doing a 24 to 40 hour trip, you have to build something that the mates can physically keep up. They just can't. No one can stay up infinitely forever. And if they tell you that, they're a storyteller, right? So everyone has to rest. So you try and just pick bits and pieces that build the best product for the charter. And that's really what it comes down to, building a product that is a top line charter for that particular group. And it's not about the fish and how many fish you catch. It's all about entertainment. Keep the boat reasonably maintained, keep it clean, smelling fresh, be the leader for the day, and give that person a lifetime experience.
Yeah.
Because that's really what you're doing, right? And you see that in any good trip guide or leader. They all have that same sort of philosophy. It may not be a trip of a lifetime, but they give you a good experience from start to finish.
Now, of those, you said 50 to 65 trips a year, offshore trips. How many of those are the same guy doing multiple, same groups doing multiple trips?
If you saw someone twice in a season, that's pretty good.
Okay.
Right? So you had a lot of what we call a traditional charter where one individual would book the boat and they'd have an invite, or we do a lot of these open boat trips or makeup trips. And depending on what boat we were on and where we were economically, and we would see more open boat trips, we would see more traditional charter trips. And the nice thing about charter fishing is you generally see that guest maybe once a year, and you probably won't see them again, right? Conversely, if you look at some of the other types of fishing where you have to see that one person often, right? So there's some pluses and minuses to that, which makes charter fishing exciting to me. You learn new different personalities over and over again. You get a lot of exposure to that.
Yeah, a lot of I've read in books and talked to captains and mates that just talking to their clients. I mean, especially an offshore trip's not cheap. I mean, what's the average overnight trip on the Canyon Runner cost?
So right now we're about a $7,000 price point. But to your point, you have to have varying levels of success to get on that boat.
Right.
Whether you're a guest or you're the individual organizing the charter, you meet some really incredible people and you listen to what they have to say, and it's amazing when you get someone in a pleasure point, right, such as fishing, not in sales, and they'll peel some onion layers back. And we've had some truly incredible guests over the years that some of them have become friends, some of them become that really cool uncle that you talk to once a year or every couple of months, and then some of them are just run-of-the-mill clients, right, not just a customer, which is interesting in and of itself. One of the last trips I ran, we actually had this individual who was chartered the boat the first year I was there, and he would keep coming back over and over, and it's great to go fishing with him, and he would say, "Kid, I remember when you were 20 or 19." Well, now I'm 35.
A very cool situation to be in, and like you said, you have these, very successful people oftentimes with their guard down, having fun, choosing to enjoy, a pleasurable experience to go out fish.
It's a great chance for a young guy to soak up some knowledge,
Totally.
for maybe a life beyond fishing.
Oh, absolutely. We've had some really successful captains and mates come through those boats and up and down those docks. And some of them branched off into, let's just call it the corporate world. And they all say it's the best sales primer I've ever had.
Yeah.
Which is interesting. I don't know that everything is sales based, but you learn how to read people. And I always call it curling. Mm-hmm. You're just guiding them to that finish line. They don't even know where it is.
Yeah. But
you're guiding them to that finish line. And that's, I jokingly say on pretty much every trip I ever do, the departure equaled the arrival. That's a win.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So trolling was the main program for you guys out in the canyon. Mostly canyon fishing. I guess you would probably do some inshore bluefin early in the season, or
Canyon Runner's known for being a canyon-oriented boat, but to be a proficient tuna fisherman, you have to adapt to conditions. So whether you're nighttime chunking, trolling, midshore tuna fishing, and that's something that only recently has become a super significant fad, like let's just say the last 10 years, right? There's always been a midshore fishery, but now there's a whole new sort of demographic of midshore only fishermen, right? Which is a totally separate conversation, but
Absolutely.
a lot of trolling. Now, don't forget, too, the boats we're running, they're trolling boats. They're sport fish boats.
Yeah.
We're not just picking the LNV day with the perfect moon phase and the perfect tidal phase to go fishing. You are going on volume. You're fishing all different conditions, all different weather conditions. Of course, safety always first, but you have to be proficient in that. In trolling, generally, with our clientele, they want a rod with line going out. They want to take that picture, reel that fish in. It's going to be a photo. It's going to be in the office. They're going to say, hey, I caught this awesome tuna. This was great. I had a great experience with these guys. We had some hamburgers on the boat. That's what it is. Mm-hmm. And understanding what that client is and clientele and building a charter around them is really the key to it.
So having to go at all times is got to be a pretty serious grind, because I'm sure you start putting pieces of the puzzle together. It's like, all right, these are the conditions, over 16 years of doing this. You have, some swings and misses, I'm sure, but you also have like, all right, when this was going on, we did this and it panned out. You have that kind of playbook. What's your favorite, if you had that top client that you want to show the most amazing canyon trip to ever, because, how would you lay out those conditions? Like for you personally, what would you, if you could set your own day conditions wise, what would it look like?
I would probably ask them what would really be meaningful to you.
Yeah.
I've been so lucky. I've been able to fish incredible conditions on incredible boats, and I get to do this often. Fishing, catches, I don't even want to talk about them because it's not really what makes me juiced up to do this anymore. Mm-hmm. I like creating memories, creating an experience. I was lucky. I started so young. I don't know life any other way without this.
Yeah.
Right? But to answer your question directly, maybe it would be a big blue marlin or an impactful wahoo or a billfish, right? Mm-hmm. I've had people that say, Deane, you caught me my first white marlin 4 years ago.
Yeah.
Okay. That's what made the impact. That's awesome. Yeah. To me, on a personal level, that's all I care about.
Yeah. Yeah. No.
A number is just a number, and that's what really happens. But it's interesting you bring up conditions because that's
what I was getting at. Like if you could be like, all right, it would be this moon phase, the tides would be doing this, the weather would be, the wind direction would be this. Like that's kind of what I was curious about.
Yeah, and there is no answer to that because Canyon Runner, one thing you'll learn about that, you just go. Yeah. You go on volume. And you just learn how to fish conditions. And the mark of a great fisherman or anyone in business that's successful is not what you do in your best return. It's what you did with a mediocre return to deliver an above market average, right? And that's what I always looked at. When I would measure our success, it was never if we caught one more. It's like, was the trip good? Did they tip out properly? Are my mates happy? And could we have caught 10, but instead we caught 12? Or could we have caught 5 and we caught 6? Mm-hmm. And was the charter happy? One of my most memorable trips that we did, not even that great of a trip, but we went out to the canyon, total bust. We ran up inshore. We found a bunch of whales, a bunch of birds. We caught, 5 or 6 fish. And I just happened to see this photo the other day. It was with a bunch of whales, so it just was memorable. But it really showed you the art of good tuna fishing. You went, you tried something, you totally failed. You make a recovery, you give a guy a great trip, and the guy was like, this was awesome. Thank you so much. It was exactly what I wanted. And we do have these long trips, but not every charter wants to live on the ocean with the captain and mate. You'll want to go fishing with people that never want to get off the ocean, but they don't want to be out there held hostage for 36, 40 hours. And we're laughing at this, but it is the truth. Yeah. I've seen that work against us at times.
Oh, yeah. The length of the trip?
Yeah. They've said it was great, but I don't need to be out there for so long. We do have to remember this is one thing that individual is going to do in their week. Right? For Canyon Runner, we just do it every day. Yeah. We just go and go and go.
held hostage. I've been on those trips, dude. I felt it's always when the fishing's tougher, but it's when you most feel
It's
that
nothing
way.
worse when you feel like you're on a hopeless trip with the end.
I talked to a buddy who they had a
Moving
tough day,
constantly.
and he goes. They're like, okay, we're leaving. And gets in the beanbag chair, falls asleep, wakes up, looks at the compass. It's headed east. The guy was like, well, I figured we check the edge real quick. It's like 8 hours later, he's still on the trip. So it was a nightmare.
It's tough, and you just hope you feel comfortable. Like the guests are comfortable at least during those tougher trips.
How many trips can you go back to back to back as the captain running the program? Is there a line of diminishing returns where it's like, all right, I've done 3 trips in a row, I'm going to take this one off?
So
You don't have that choice.
I would go, and what you've got to watch out there is for the crew that they're not mentally totally roached.
Yeah.
Because that happens. Like
Yeah.
fishing, you see this common. Like you start to see guys behaving or fishermen behaving in weird ways where like weird things are happening to them. And they're saying weird things or they're just doing weird things. And you're like, wow, this person's totally smoked.
Yeah.
They need to be chilled out. And it's interesting because the most important thing with fishing and keeping the crew mentally there is dealing with the discomfort. You have to give people direction, and any good captain can read that and immediately address that before it's a problem. I'm cramping up. Drink water.
Yeah, what you're mentioning
Something
is
as small, those trivial details make a big difference. Get a rain jacket on. Take your wet T-shirt off. You sweat through it.
yeah. You mentioned like everybody thinks as the captain of a charter boat like that, you have to find the fish, but you're talking about crew management as well. You've got to watch
Totally.
out. There's so many more variables, especially on a big boat. Now, what's the full crew on an offshore trip on the Canyon Runner? So there's the captain, first mate.
Typically, there'll be a second mate, but many times it would just be myself and one mate working.
Okay.
And it depends on the vessel you're on, too. The 48 we have, very capable, great boat for fishing with just a capable mate and a capable captain. And I'm very fortunate, too. We have great mates on these boats. I mean, we really have top talent and specialists. I mean, we have some of the best entertainers in the world fishing with us. And I've been very fortunate to fish with a lot of mates. Some of them hack it, some of them don't. Some of them say it's just not for me, of which I totally understand. But we have some really, really top-tier talent that help you get through that.
So how many rods? So it's just a captain and a mate on the 48, like you said. How many rods in the trolling spread are you managing?
On a canyon trip, we'll do right around 10.
Okay.
Is usually what we do. Sometimes we'll fish 14. Again, a lot of
That seems a lot for just 2 guys to
fish a
manage.
few rods up top, a few rods down there. You manage it depending on your crew and how big your charter is. You have 6 charters, it's different.
Yeah.
You have a guy and 2 kids. I don't know that you're going to be able to handle 6 big guys, right? Like that's like what you have to, and you've got to see that and manage accordingly, right? Like maybe you don't go big eye fishing. Maybe you just go tile fishing at that point.
Yeah.
Those are the subtle nuances that create that next level experience.
Yeah, that makes sense. You got to kind of play the hand you're dealt and
Totally.
react to that on the fly on a consistent basis to not overwhelm the crew or the charter.
It's so important because it's a marathon, not a sprint.
Yeah.
Too many people sprint out day one and they're not there for day
burnout,
2.
yeah. What's your favorite species to pursue? What do you like the most? Enjoy the most?
I don't even care.
Yeah.
I enjoy tuna fishing. I would consider myself an above average tuna fisherman. But all of these fishing species are awesome to fish for. And I like fishing for what's there.
Yeah.
No one likes sitting there all day not catching anything. And that's another thing we do a lot of. You have to be adaptive. You have to change it up.
Yeah, don't just keep banging your head against the wall trying to get the tuna bite if you could be catching mahi.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly. And one thing I liked about Canyon Runners, you had so much time. I never felt rushed if I wanted to take a stab at, I'm going to check this midshore location out, then I'll go to the canyon. Or I'll go to the canyon first, and if this totally putters out, then I'll go inshore.
So over the course of your time, talking specifically about trolling techniques, how much did it change from when you started to now? What's changed in terms of the spread and in the approach to it? Has there been much change?
So overall, I would say that there's minimal change. I think there's generally accepted principles now, right? So let's just start with spreader bars, right? Canyon Runner is sort of infamous for having their high-speed squid of spreader bar, right? And they were in that business 20, 25 years ago. that's all kind of gone to the waypoint now where standard issue would be some sort of wide tracker spreader bar, right? Mm-hmm. Some of that is because you catch a lot of small fish on those spreader bars, and that's great for charter fishing. Some of that is there's less tangles, less crew management. I think the biggest change in fishing is the information game, and that works with you and against you in different ways. And so that's probably what is altered fishing the most, where now you can kind of go into a canyon and say, I can probably catch a handful of tunas here, or I won't go here because there was a boat there and it was terrible. I will try place B, right? As opposed to looking at, I have to go to X place.
And that's become another aspect of the Canyon Runner business.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. Tell us about the virtual captain system.
So that's kind of an interesting product where we've had this information service for close to 18 years now. It was sort of a one-off product due to just the way that satellite communication worked. You didn't have reliable satellite communication. And you also didn't have the masses that were interested in embracing satellite communication. You still have a lot of fishermen that say, I want to be off the grid. I don't know that is a practical mindset in this world anymore, and that's really for people to debate themselves. But outsider looking in, or insider looking out, I would say that the more information I had, the better off I would do. And that's what I liked about Canyon Runner, I was able to network more and more and see different perspectives and see which areas we're producing to give our charters better trips. And so before I answer that virtual captain question, I want to add one thing. I realized that Canyon Runner, when I started running the boat, was not even so much about the fish. It was about getting that information before the masses had it so that I could put on a good trip to fish the evolving conditions. I was not that worried about others finding that information. I think it's a vast misconception. You just want to be fishing in an area that is evolving positively. You never want to fish on a downside. And we've all been there where you're just like, this just
dried up.
Isn't there. It's drying up. You always want to fish wherever that best new area is. So I was always chasing that. And I would spend a lot of time figuring out where not to go. But the virtual captain system, that's a really interesting product. There's new technology that's coming out that is creating information swap and exchange faster and faster. And so to my original point where when I was running the boat, I like to have as much information as possible. Now, let's just say everyday fisherman or a new fisherman or someone that wants to learn more about fishing can access that information at a pro level. So not only do you have professional perspective in there, but you also have, let's just say, everyday DIY fishermen, right? And some of them may be members of our own service, some of them may not, but you're accessing a professional network and you're getting those different perspectives. But most importantly, you're getting the variables that will move the needle in your fishing trip. And you know that's true because it's the same variables we look at as professionals. Whether you have top tournament cruise fishing or just run-of-the-mill fishing overnighter crews or just midshore tuna fishermen, there's so much information there. And then we've added some of the other features of sea surface temperature, chlorophyll, weather. It's all there. Because individuals that are close to this industry, we are so close, we don't always see that there's a lot of folks out there that maybe don't even know the right questions to ask. Maybe they're embarrassed. Maybe they don't have a third party to even confirm, can I go out today? It says on the NOAA forecast, 15 to 20 out of the southwest. What is that going to be like in my 28-foot boat? What is that going to be like in a 60-foot boat? My friend down the dock's going to go, but he has a professional crew. What do they see that I don't? And so it's a unique product that fishermen that want to learn more about fishing can actually use it.
Do you see information as the most valuable asset as an offshore fisherman?
I think that could be true for all of life.
Yeah, right. I mean,
knowing what not to do is far more important than what to do.
It's everybody's always said, oh, it's the network that you can, grow the info that you have to plan a trip. It's like that. You still have to catch the fish. You still have to get them to bite, all that stuff. But just being in the right place, and in a safe place.
I've got kind of like a 101 question for you, though. You mentioned in among the variables, sea surface temperature. Know why that's important. Why is chlorophyll important, and how is it?
So chlorophyll is important in the sense that it gives you a spectrum of water clarity, right? Now, it's a variable, and back to my point previously where the variables that move the needle. far too many get confused with, I've got sea surface temperature, I have chlorophyll, I know where the fish are, or my one friend caught fish here 5 days ago. Those are all data points, but you have to put the data set together to figure out where you really need to go or where you need to be, which is even more important, right? And so chlorophyll will give you that perception of water that's quote unquote dirty or water that's clean.
Okay.
Far more important offshore than it is midshore.
So in general, you want less chlorophyll, so cleaner water?
Yes.
Okay, so my perception of it was the opposite. I was like, chlorophyll meant an upwelling, meant more bait fish and stuff in the food chain, but that actually it means more dirtier water. So
Correct.
Okay.
It's an inverse variable, but what's most important there is you just look at one of these variables in that data set to really figure out where you want to be.
So if you were, let's say you're breaking Manasquan Inlet, right? Mm-hmm. Of the you've got how many options for canyons that you could possibly hit coming out of Manasquan?
There's a lot. It's numerous canyons. Let's just say 10 plus, sure.
So you've got 10 canyons possibly to hit. What conditions are going to steer you in one direction versus the other?
So
aside from recent fish reports, catch reports.
Well, even let's say maybe the reports are good in the Hudson, but the conditions are looking good. Linden Cole.
Yeah. So every trip, I get this question all the time. Well, where are you going to go?
Yeah.
I have spent hours and hours in front of a computer. When I wake up every morning, I look at the sea surface temperature on a very macro level, just trying to see what is going on globally. Mm-hmm. That's about all I do now for sea surface temperature. We don't really know where we're going to go until we have broken the inlet. And now, with the advent of the satellite communication, you could be making course corrections at any time, right? Depending on new satellite shot, maybe new fishing information. And maybe it's not always what you assume. It could be so-and-so's in a canyon and they haven't caught anything all day. Maybe the water pulled off and you just don't realize it. And so you have to make that change.
Yeah.
Now, you don't see that in June as much because it's very tight. You're typically fishing slope water versus Gulf Stream water, clean water versus dirty water. But in August, you may have a good trip in the Linden Cole. You're ready to go back out, and no one's caught a fish there all morning. So you're going to leave in the afternoon. Where are you going to go? That's when you make that course correction and go to the Hudson, right? So you look at all these variables holistically, and then you start to make these decisions. And what makes sense? You may have a chart that says, I need to go tile fishing. Like, this is the trip. This is what I want, which I've dealt with. And, okay, you take them tile fishing. Now, you may lose out on great tuna fishing, which I've been there. Or you have great tuna fishing, and it's like, well, Deane, I didn't get my tile fish. So there's a customer management and expectation component to all of this that all goes into building out a trip. So there's no specific template. There's a bit of an art form to it, but it's also just, again, reading some of those signs, whether it's the people in the cockpit to what you see on the sea surface shot.
Now, for your average guy, I mean, let's say us. I feel like sometimes we get paralyzed by having too much information. Like sometimes we're like, everything looks good. If I had to pick, what's your hierarchy of data? I guess if I could, leaving reports out of it.
Yeah, and there's paralysis by analysis, but I think you look at overall weather.
Okay.
Right? You need to be fishing in weather that's conducive to safety and then conducive to getting home and fishing the appropriate weather class for your boat, right? Which there's basically 10 to 15. Or I'm sorry, 15 to 20. Like after 15 to 20, you can catch, but it just becomes very hard to land any sort of big game fish, right? And then you can't really see anything either. That's another big issue we have. So let's just say we're canyon fishing. It's going to be 15 to 20. And at that point, we're pretty much going to throw the towel in. We may fish in with like a little bit higher gusts into 25 in a big tournament day, but even that ends up hurting you more than you actually end up winning in that scenario. If we were midshore fishing, like 10 to 15 would kind of be like my maximum. I'd want to do that. If it was a diminishing forecast, then I'd consider that. But those are all the different sort of variables. But you look at the weather, then you start looking at your sea surface temperature shots, your chlorophyll, and you kind of make that rough analysis. And you also have just an idea of where you left off, right? Because it's a marathon, you might have been on the ocean 12 hours ago, 6 hours ago, 24 hours ago, 36 hours ago. Or maybe there's a boat that just happens to not care. They have to get the trip in, and you have someone on the grounds.
See, that's the benefit of a virtual captain system like that for when you have people that, for us, if we get out every other week, we're doing pretty good. Mm-hmm. So we can't just start where we left off, but we can see where, how many boats are involved in that?
So we have 500 now.
So 500. So from a pool of 500 boats, where guys have been going out and what they've been seeing on the water, and that's the benefit of that information there.
And keep in mind, we're from Maine all the way through Costa Rica now, right? Into the Bahamas, Puerto Rico. I mean, it's a vast amount of exposure.
And you're always chasing that next bite, like being ahead of the curve of.
Well, aren't we all?
Yeah, exactly. And that's the I think that's where having a great understanding of big picture, what's going on, how things are moving, where it's like it might be dead right now, but by the time I get out there, tomorrow afternoon, that bite's heading that way, and hopefully I'm on the front end of it. That's going to be a big part of staying ahead of the fleet, if you will.
And a vast majority of what we're really doing at Canyon Runner is matching conditions. So I don't necessarily have this template of everything I do. Like, I look at what is taking place around me and saying, are these conditions the same? If everyone in here yesterday had 74-degree water, now it's 76 in bright blue versus 74 in blended, well, you need to make a move west or make a move north, right? That's generally the water's all going to move southwest here.
Okay.
On a big picture level. So you've got to start to realize what you're fishing in. And that is very important. So matching those conditions is important. Like if someone said, hey, I had a great chunk bite, but I was in all sorts of grass and I'm in the same area not seeing that grass, well, there you go. You better move southwest because that grass line was in there somewhere.
Mm-hmm. So just going back to things that have changed in the trolling, you mentioned the spreader bars, how the side track, the wide tracking spreader bars have become more effective. Did you guys always do dredges?
We've done dredges. Again, you've got to look at your crew. If you're fishing with one mate, they're going to probably say, I'm not doing that. And that's okay. You can't be everywhere at once in fishing. If you're bill fishing, I would say dredges are going to be generally accepted as the way to go fishing. Can you raise a blue marlin without a dredge? Absolutely. Should you be fishing dredges if you're blue marlin fishing? Yeah, probably. You'll probably catch more tuna fish with them, but you can't do everything.
That's a good point. Yeah, have to fish within your limitations too.
Totally. You just got to build a system that works for the boat. And every boat's truly different in one-off, depending on who the mate is, their caliber, who the caliber of captain is, who's on the boat. I think the second biggest change to fishing is going to be, or third biggest, is that Omni Sonar. Like you're really seeing a lot more fishing now, and you're starting to see a lot of individuals really increase their game and step their game up significantly with that. And you're just a much more efficient fisherman because of it.
So have you been on boats with it and
I have.
used it? So I didn't really know what I knew of it, and I assumed it was like live scope in largemouth bass fishing because I don't know anything, I don't know electronics. But I finally looked into it. So it's like underwater radar. You see here's a red blob that's out there, and it pings every few seconds.
Every one of them's different.
Yeah.
The Searchlight versus the Omni where it pings, but overall you know where fish are next to you, and it totally changes the way you're fishing a given area, which is super interesting, right?
Yeah.
There'd be times where we'd straight line through an area and we would just keep going because we didn't see anything. But there's many times I see something, I'm like, there's a mark, let's go work this area 1 or 2 more laps. Boom, you get a bite. Yeah. It really helps.
Now, on the boats you fish with it, was there someone dedicated to watching that, or was that kind of just in your periphery?
It depends. Again, it's all about the crew you have. I mean, the top tournament teams, they all have a dedicated sonar specialist. But if you're lucky enough to have one, great. But I've also seen that blow up horribly where someone thinks they're playing Nintendo and you're out to lunch. That doesn't do anything for anyone at that point.
It's like you're hunting submarines at that point. That's what it feels like.
You definitely get an additional perspective if you have someone that is running it solely that's proficient in it. You're going to see more because what you're starting to see now is all the video game fishing where you're just solely focused on what's in front of you or in the screen, not what's around you.
And
right?
you're missing breaking fish.
In tuna fishing,
mile that way.
Right, that's great. You need to see what's around you if you're catching yellowfins and longfins and mahi. If you're catching big eyes and blue marlin, the sonars will really... you'll really step your game up in that type of fishing. And that's also what you're seeing more of now. You're seeing more blue marlin. You're seeing more big eyes caught because that really gives you a significant advantage.
Now, the big eye seems like that fishery has... Man, so when was 15 years ago that you first became a captain and started doing this? Feels like the big eye fishing and the proficiency that guys have at it's really gone up over in that span of time.
You're definitely seeing a trend in the big eyes being around. You're seeing significantly more concentration into it. And I think you're also seeing less yellowfin being caught, less longfin being caught. And you just look at the charter boats up and down the docks from, let's just say, North Carolina, Morehead City, all the way up through Massachusetts, right? There's less and less photos of limits of yellowfin, but there's more and more catches of bluefin and big eye. And that's just the up cycle we're in versus the down cycle.
So, like, kind of the cyclical state of that species is more bluefin. There's more big eye right now, and yellowfin are kind of trending down, longfin too.
I don't want to go there and say they're trending
Yeah.
down. I just look at the landings historically and say there's not as many.
Yeah.
Right? Now, you can make an argument,
They
well, there's
could be
less
somewhere
charter
else.
boats out there.
Yeah.
Right? And that's true, too.
Yeah.
But overall, if you were to compare Oregon Inlet, May, June, July, August, versus 20 years ago, you're going to see less yellowfin caught, right? And that's the same in Ocean City or Virginia Beach, Ocean City, Cape May, Manasquan as you work your way up.
And the longfin seem to be almost completely absent.
So I think what's interesting there is like the calendar's almost gotten far later. So there's a lot more longfin out in those canyons in November and December and even into January than we realize. You just don't have any sort of effort in there.
Yeah.
I mean, it really puts out second week in November. That's really over. And by Labor Day, the masses are starting to depart from what I would call daily fishing, where there's that daily awareness.
Yeah, the best longfin trip I ever had was on a headboat in November on the Big Jamaica. And that was, I mean, as fast as you could catch
Right.
them at one point. And then you know, some big eye mixed in. But the longfin used to be, like, they would cover you up. Like, I mean, I'm sure trolling 10 rods, you've had times when all
Yeah.
10 had longfin on them. So they were nice from that perspective. But it's, I haven't seen one in person in like 5 or 6 years. Quantum is back and saltier than ever with the new Benchmark and Strive saltwater spinning reels. Last season, I used the Benchmark in the surf from Cape Cod to New Jersey, catching bass and blues on my 6000 series and albies and fluke on my 2500 series. Last season, I used the Benchmark in the surf from Cape Cod to New Jersey, catching bass and blues on my 6000 model and albies and fluke on my 2500 model. The seal lock protection and IPX6 water resistance rating kept the reel performing flawlessly through every splash, spray, and accidental dunking. The best-in-class carbon fiber drag stayed smooth and put the boots to the fish. I cannot wait to break these reels back out when the stripers return in the spring. Also available is the new Quantum Myth High Modulus Carbon Fiber Rods. Built with Sea Guide corrosion-resistant guides for friction-free line flow and premium cork handles, these Inshore rods pair perfectly with the Benchmark and Strive reels. To learn more about Quantum's triumphant return to the saltwater scene, visit quantum.com. Quantum, tested beyond limits.
Deane, you're super experienced catering to all different types of wants. Like, you have people that come on your boat and it's like, I want to catch white marlin, I want to catch blue marlin, I want to catch big eye and tuna fish. You can go around and around with everything that swims in our water. Can we play a little game of, like, I have a 30-foot boat and I want to catch this species. Where would I start to set my program up? And like, you know, let's just 8 rods. Like, how would Deane Lambros, if you're comfortable sharing, you know, set that boat up to go target blue marlin? And we'll go species by species, because like you guys with Canyon Runner, you guys do a ton of seminars. Your business has evolved to now the virtual captain, you know, community that you've built. You know, I like to kind of share those insights if somebody's just getting into that boat that's canyon capable and choosing which species he wants to catch. Where does he start?
So I would say overall, as a starting point, and this is a great question, it's actually pretty fun to think about. You want to look at what equipment you have to start first, right? Not every person's going to have a full set of dredge rods and 130s and dedicated pitch rods, nor will they have the crew. But look at what equipment is on the boat. Make those selections based on what you have. So let's just say you have 430s and 450s. You got some trolling equipment. Maybe it's not the best, but you got enough to get in the game. Troll some spreader bars, troll some small feathers or tuna clones or small ballyhoo, and that'll get you a bunch of bites on little fish, like maybe some skipjack, maybe some dolphin, maybe some yellowfins or longfins, maybe a bluefin. That'll kind of get you in the game.
Yep.
Right? And so that's just general sort of all-around canyon trolling, right? A very sort of simple meat spread, small lures, sea witches, things like that.
Okay.
8 rods. Perfect.
Yep.
Also, make sure you have enough rod holders on the boat. It's amazing. I go on some of these boats. they don't have rod holders to clear a rod. I don't even know how anything's caught.
Yeah.
But they do catch, which is amazing. And hats off to all of these guys. If you were going to chase white marlin, I would say you're going to start to get into the teaser fishing. You're going to start to get into the dredge fishing. And then you're going to go with dedicated dink rods. And then with the teasers, you'd have the election to do a blue marlin pitch. That would be like my starting point. And you'll have your opportunities at tunas and mahis if you're going to do that. We don't see a lot of that, let's just say, northeast of the Hudson. Right? We just don't have the billfish crowd here in masses. And it just seems that our tuna fishing is just so good, you almost don't need to do that. And then if we were going to go blue marlin fishing, probably either approach it just like white marlin fishing, maybe put 2 lures out, or if you wanted to go plug fishing with the dedicated tag lines and 4 big marlin lures, you could do that.
So plug fishing meaning just big
Large
marlin.
lures,
Got
yeah.
it.
Because we do have some really large blue marlin in the Northeast and Mid-Atlantic. And that's an interesting fishery, but we just don't have the effort, and we have a lot of real estate here.
Do they like the big lures, like big nomads and the I forget is it the Marauder, the big triangular ones that a lot of them fishing like?
Or are you talking more like black barts and things like that?
Mostly like black barts, like dedicated marlin plugs. Because when you get into the blue marlin fishing, and I'm by no means an expert on this, but the hook set is super important, right? And how that fish is going to clamp down on that particular lure. And there's all sorts of different philosophies on this with different sort of ideas and angles on this. But I've had very limited success with blue marlins at the boat, actually getting blue marlin to the boat that have been hooked on a Marauder or a Bomber or an X-Rab. It's not to say it can't be done, because I'm sure someone's done it. Just for me, it's not the best way.
Maybe seen one that I can remember on a Nomad DTX that was just shit luck probably, but
snagging the bill or something,
What's your most memorable blue marlin encounter out there? Do you have one that
you know,
can pinpoint?
it's not really something I've done a lot with. I just actually caught my first blue marlin ever that I was an angler for in January in Costa Rica. So that was an interesting experience. But it's always something I wanted to do. To go to a Mid-Atlantic or a White Marlin Open and kill a big blue one, I think would be the ideal memory for any fisherman. I haven't gotten there. I don't know that I will.
Yeah.
But it's something that I would like to do.
Yeah, the white marlin thing, we both got him casting live bait at him this year, but have not really tried the dedicated trolling program for them. Do you have will clients come on and say, I really want to get a white marlin today, or is it just you go out there and you see things look good for it and you'll adjust the spread accordingly? We
are really known as a tuna boat.
Yeah.
We don't really do white marlin fishing, only out of necessity. What's an interesting fishery is that fishery you're mentioning off Martha's Vineyard, Nantucket. That's very compelling. And obviously need the right conditions, the right team, but I mean, spectacular fishing. And that is a fishery I would like to be more involved in or participate more in. I don't really get the choice or the option to, but super interesting nonetheless. And again, the quality and caliber of the bill fishing that is local here, I mean, is incredible. And then some of what was caught in the canyons, let's just say off this region this year or 2024, was incredible. I mean, there were riggerfuls or 2 riggerfuls. I mean, that's pretty much as good as it gets.
It was a good billfish year up this way this past year. It was crazy.
I mean, Ocean City,
catch them, so
yeah.
What does that tell you?
Ocean City, Maryland too seems like a pretty incredible marlin.
Yeah, you got a lot of top talent there and a lot of folks that actually push to do it, which is great. It's one of the few inlets that really has a dedicated charter fleet, and then you have a lot of do-it-yourself fishermen and private boats that go, and they go often and they go hard, which is great.
And they catch.
Yeah.
All right, I'm gonna go a little close to home here. I got 8 rods. I got that 30-foot center console or whatever. I got outriggers. I want to go catch a big eye. How am I doing it?
So I would think that you'd put together a pattern that you're comfortable with. I mean, I think there's generally accepted patterns of some deep diving plugs, some spreader bars, some ballyhoo, maybe some artificial tails. And you want to set up in a canyon 200 to 400 fathoms over quality structure, so over a corner. And hopefully you're doing that in an area where there's been big eyes caught. And I would say you probably want to be there first light into a few hours into the morning and then a few hours into the evening to sundown. and maybe perhaps even trolling an hour into dark.
Is that where you kind of cut it off, trolling at night?
It all depends. I look at our nighttime program is always dictated by what's being caught around us, what's available to harvest. You know, with sharks being shut down now, a lot of times we use that time to steam, right? So build the trip around the daylight as opposed to the evening, or vice versa. It all depends on if you had to go the extra mile and go a significantly long distance. Sometimes you have to travel during the day. So look at how these fish are being caught, and then look at where we need to be to make that sort of withdrawal from that area.
Now, the nighttime chunking tuna bite, is that, I feel like I hear less about that than I did years ago. Is that something that's kind of faded? It's been shifted more into the daylight, or are fewer people staying overnight and doing it?
I think that bite is not what it once was. It's interesting. We don't have as many tunas midsummer in the canyons, but we've got more tunas midshore than we've had previously. And so that's changed, right? We had a lot of tunas midshore in the southern water, southern mid-Atlantic. We don't see that as much anymore, right? We've seen this shift north and east. Maybe that's climate change. Maybe it's only 200 miles. That's not much for a tuna fish, right? So it's a small geographic area. It's a lot for a human, not a lot for a fish. We could debate that all day, but there's less tunas available at night, less fish being trolled, and we're seeing more nighttime chunking later in the season. It's almost as if the fish step back off onto the bank as opposed to being in 30 fathoms.
Yeah, you talked about like the mid-Atlantic chunking and the midshore ones. That was all of my tuna fishing when I was, I'd say in my late teens, early 20s, was out of Cape May, hitting the hot dog and all the lumps, midshore lumps there. And
court
chunking.
area, the scalloper bite. I mean, we don't really see a lot of that anymore. Now, we also don't see as many scallopers out there, right? Where have they been fishing? East, off George's. I mean, now all of them go to east. Or right now, where's the scallop bite right now? Or scallopers, they're off Maine.
Yeah, now when there's tuna on the scalpers, they're all 500 pound or so now.
That's different too, right? You don't see as many school tunas, but you see these gargantuan giants.
I think it's a bait deal where it's just the concentration of bait seems to be trending inshore more so than offshore.
The only thing consistent in fishing is change.
Yeah.
I don't spend a lot of time pondering these situations. I just look at the observations and match what we can do.
Do you see a lot of precursors to, like, in other regions and other, I mean, like you said, you take a big macro look at what's going on, especially with, how much coverage Canyon Runner's, like, tech system offers now. Do you look at other areas of the globe as an indicator of what we might see in our upcoming season? Do you guys put much stock in that at all, or not really?
I think that we focus regionally where our customer base is. And at this point, we don't necessarily have interest, and we're not at that point where we're going to scale to looking at the other side of the globe, if you will. But what would be an interesting conversation to have would be to talk to a Japanese fishing master from a longline boat and find out what they see, right? Because I think that would be the most interesting indicator of where are they fishing? Are they fishing further north and east? Or are they fishing further south and west, right, if you were on the opposite side of the hemisphere?
Yeah.
Just to get a better, more consistent understanding, because we have a robust fishery here, rod and reel. That's not the same in other countries, right? You just don't have the wealth to do it. And we have unique geography here, right? We have this extended shelf and these incredible canyons.
It is pretty wild how much structure is out there just on that, that edge.
It's incredible.
It's nuts.
Truly incredible.
What's your favorite fishing spot nickname?
I don't even have a favorite spot. I just know where fish will be. I mean, if I had to pick a canyon I feel confident in, I'd say the Hudson.
Yeah.
I know it, but it's a great canyon. It's a big canyon, and there's pretty much always something to be caught there.
Cheech likes where Gordon Scully, where the fingers approach Gordon Scully. Cheech always gets him excited going there.
There's certain names where it's like, that's a badass name for a fishing spot. I just was wondering if you've heard one and you were like, I like that. Not that it's good or bad, it's just a cool name.
I've never really thought about it.
Yeah, stump Deane.
I don't really put too much focus on names as much as like, here's the region that we can make a withdrawal from. Well, it's unique because we're fishing in a given year. When I was on my everyday fishing, I would go from North Carolina all the way up to out here. right? Sometimes I'm fishing George's Bank. So at that point, names are superfluous. It's just you're following a tuna migration up and down, and you're looking for conditions.
The Outer Banks fishery sounds pretty incredible, that winter fishery.
Pretty cool. Pretty cool place to fish. You'll learn a lot about reading water, and you will get your feelings hurt as a fisherman. It'll humble you quickly. And I'll always remember Captain Dennis Endy of the Assault Weapon. He said, you need to learn here how to go fishing, and you need to watch that you don't get too spun up. Remember what you're here for, and spend some time looking around you.
So what makes it more complicated than, say, out of Jersey?
So you have an ever-changing water condition that's changing by the second. And all of those fishermen around you, you're fishing with top talent. You're fishing a multitude of species over a given year, but they understand the way water works. And they spend a lot of time looking into the water, more so than what fishermen here are doing. We're fishing slope water, very generic, typically. Down there, you're fishing water changes and breaks, and things move very fast.
Yeah, the Gulf Stream's a lot closer.
Pumping, 5.5, 6 knots, and then you have this downward draft of cold water. And so you fish that change, that western edge of the Gulf Stream, and as it meanders up and down over that 100-fathom curve, you may be plus or minus a handful of miles. I mean, I've rode the tide there 10 miles north in a given day because that's where the break was as you ascended up. So you really learn how to look into that water and understand that you're fishing these specific conditions. And it can change, too. You may think you found all the fish in 74-degree water, and then somebody finds them up in 68-degree water in the afternoon, and it shuts right down on you.
Now, you were primarily bluefin tuna fishing down there?
Primarily bluefin tuna fishing, but we were also there for some of the springtime yellowfin bite and a big eye bite.
Do they get is there a winter blackfin run there or no?
They have a blackfin run, and I'm not that sharp on it, but it's typically summer-ish, and it's further off Hatteras.
Okay.
But that place changes often. It's not as if the fish are confined to a 2-by-2 mile area, and here's where you are, right? I mean, we've had days where we fish east of the point, and then the next day we run down to the 280 rocks because they found the bluefins. So fish there will make this circle a lot.
Now, trolling horse ballyhoo was the main thing down there? Or what'd you do down there?
Just a myriad of different ballyhoos. Most folks are trolling ballyhoos. Sometimes you'll catch them on spreader bars or daisy chains, but the ballyhoos seem to work pretty well there.
Did you run into any recreational size fish, or was it all giants?
Yeah, there's a tremendous fishery there. Every year's different. And in fact, when we first started really fishing that fishery, it was a smaller class of fish, and they've slowly ascended. And now you look at the landings of that area, 500-600 dress average is common, right? Versus it used to be 300 dress average. Oh, that's a big one, 90-incher.
Yeah, I mean, the
Sick.
state record broke in North Carolina a couple times. I think it's finally over 1,000 pounds, but before that, it was like hovering in the 7s or 8s.
Yeah, pretty cool.
They got something cool going down there this spring where the fish came close enough. The guys off Jeanette's Pier in Nags Head were actually hooking tuna. They hooked enough that NOAA got involved. They sent enforcement officers there and threatening a $2,000 fine to anybody fishing tuna off the pier there.
That's interesting. It's unfortunate maybe to some, but good for the regulatory force, I guess.
Yeah, it's kind of spurred on this whole debate. Now, I don't want to go too far down this, but there are guys now fighting for a legal pathway for shore fishermen to get permitted for tuna because the highly migratory species permit, as you know, has to be attached to a registered vessel. So you could put one on a kayak, but if I want to go cast off Jeanette's Pier, there's nothing I would have to register myself, as a vessel, which you can't do. So they're trying to correct that. It's such a rare and unique occurrence that it may never happen again in anybody's lifetime who's fighting for this opportunity to buy an HMS permit individually. But it's kind of interesting that it's going on. Just a little neat wrinkle in the early tuna season so far this year.
I'd like to register this Yeti haul, please. There has definitely been a pattern of big inshore bluefin the last year or two. Probably it's been more noticeable, I would say, than. And I'm talking about fish like where you would typically striper fish, like tight.
And that's something that's probably not too conducive to the charters that Canyon Runner typically takes.
We have a slightly different trip, but I think that you're also seeing awareness now, right? Everyone has a camera. Everyone has a voice, which is great, right? And they're able to display these different tunas sightings more and more often. And particularly in the
time.
case you just outlined. Maybe it wasn't to their advantage, but still pretty cool, right?
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Catch a big tuna from land. I don't know that I'd want to fight it, but I'd probably want to watch it.
I would definitely want to watch it. I'd want to fight it.
Yeah, apparently a couple guys got them close enough to the pier where they were looking straight down and took pictures. I think they were like fishing the 60-inch range, but skinny.
So cool.
A couple kayak guys actually landed them and kept them, and they were allegedly they were permitted so they could do it. And the fish were absolute skinniest bluefin I've ever seen. So, I mean, you were fish down there in the winter into the spring. Was that typical? Would they were kind of, like, had they just spawned? Were they just moving around a lot, so they were leaned out, or what the fish look like down in North Carolina?
So we've caught fish of all different sort of, let's
Shapes
just
and
say,
sizes.
preferred sizes, whatever. We've had fish with some fat. We've had skinny racers, red meat fish. I think down there you've got such a diverse group of fish coming through that is part of the problem. The other issue is that you don't necessarily have the plentiful bait stock there, right? You have Kroger's, you've got some squid, maybe you got some bluefish. Versus up here, northeast, you've got the mackerel, you've got the herring. Those are typically what are going to give you the quote-unquote fatter fish, right? At least that's what's believed or general consensus. I think something else that's important too is fish are just in all shapes and sizes, just like human beings, right? And I think that's an important note that not every fish you're going to catch is going to be, let's just call it a diamond, right? You got to take the good with the bad.
Yeah,
Genetics play a role in that.
Yeah, and you talked about the bait up here, and something interesting that's happened in the last few years is the bait fish that they've seen in some of the fish in New England. The primary diet has shifted from sea herring I'm talking off Maine and maybe off North Shore, Massachusetts. It's gone from sea herring to predominantly bunker. Mm-hmm. So the sea herring populations have been declining. Bunker seems to be, we see more and more of it all the way up to Maine, and the tuna have kind of shifted their diet, and they've been what's that? Dr. Walt, who talked about that with?
Walt did talk about that, and I forget what the ratio was. It was something in the neighborhood of like they got to eat 3 to equal the same caloric intake as one herring or something like that.
But they said there was 1 year, an anomaly, where it was like sea herring, then squid.
Yeah.
1 year. There was this boom year of the short fin squid, the Ilex squid. I don't know if you would have seen that down off Jersey.
We
but,
did. We saw it. I mean, it was kind of like a northeastern, or East Coast event. Like they saw it from Florida all the way.
Really?
It was crazy. I mean, we had them in the canal with stripers fighting over each other to eat them.
Nuts.
So I'd like to see that again. But apparently that happens like every couple decades or so, because if you look back to the 1970s, there's reports in Provincetown newspapers of just millions of squid washed up dead on the beaches there. Though it might not feel like it yet, the saltwater season is coming up fast, which means it's time to reserve your spot at the rail on one of the boats in the Helen H fleet. The trips begin in early April aboard the Starfish, fishing the winter flounder grounds in Cape Cod Bay. By June, the Helen H will be running past Nantucket to the best fluke fishing grounds in the Northeast. If catching a doormat fluke is on your bucket list, these trips offer your best shot at catching a double-digit flatfish. I caught my first 10-pound fluke aboard the Helen H a couple years ago, and that fish wasn't even in the top 3 when it came to deciding who won the pool money. New for 2025, fishermen can enjoy more space at the rail aboard the Angler, which is running 10-hour, open boat, ultra-limited trips to Nantucket Shoals. And if you want to fish the canyons, my favorite way to get there has always been aboard a headboat. The Helen H begins running offshore in late summer with 2- and 3-day trips targeting tuna, mahi, and swordfish. A couple years back, I watched Cheech lose his first ever swordfish right at the boat aboard the Helen H, and we'll be back out there this fall looking for redemption. There's plenty of great fishing options with the Helen H fleet this season, but the boats book up fast, so be sure to reserve your trip today at helen-h.com.
I'm a big fan of the Sorry, the Atlantic Sorry right now. I'm rooting for a comeback for those guys, because that always produces some great tuna acrobatics. That
Totally.
It's been, there's been little blips of half peak bites the last couple seasons, but nothing like sustainable.
Yeah.
For us anyways, local here to Cape Cod, and that's always been a fun one to go run around, and they're easy to see. Those fish come cartwheeling out of the water on them. It's the best.
Awesome fishing.
Do you have any? I know you're not. You're more of an experienced guy, but as far as like a trip that just was so memorable that it's like I gotta share this story. Do you have one of those that might be a notch above the rest, and it could be because of who was on the boat or how things went down or whatever. Any story time?
Yeah, I mean, I've had some incredible catches, right?
Yeah.
But I think some of the stories that really come to mind, and we'll just paraphrase it, but it's about working with the team and everyone pulling through. Whether an angler wasn't cooperative, whether the captain was just having a tough day, whether you as a team got us through it, and then we got back to it, right? And so much of that is the you call it the frat house of fishing, right? But that teamwork, that brotherhood you have, and all of the other things that you learn about those guys you're doing this with, even at the dock, the late night oil changes, the late night sort of, hey dude, I'm down, help me out. Like, what do I need to do? I need some advice. I'm in a jam up right now, right? All of those different sort of moments are, to me, like, again, I don't know life any other way without it.
Yeah.
I got into it so young. It's just, this has been my natural course of life moving forward.
That's something that's so cool about offshore fishing in general. It's a, like you said, a brotherhood. It's everybody's really banding together for it to make that successful trip, that great experience for the clients. Whereas surf fishing, like there's a great surf fishing community, but everybody's kind of fishing alone together. If that makes sense. We're all pursuing the same thing, but you're really relying on yourself. Whereas for offshore, it's more, there's a whole bunch of people lifting each other up to do that. Going right back to the information, to share the information sharing and the network you have to help point the bow in the right direction.
Totally.
The question I wanted to ask, we got sidetracked from earlier, is how do you deal with seasickness on the boat?
Seasickness is tough, right? And that's just case by case, one off. I mean, we've literally had guys that the moment we untied the lines to the moment we tied lines back up, that person was in the cockpit, sitting there, could not go in the cabin, could barely move, to, let's just call it milder cases.
Yeah.
Everyone has different seasickness management methods. I've always said, get outside, look at what we're here for, pay attention, get off your phone for a minute, right? Look at the horizon, breathe some fresh air. You're not going to die. You'll be fine. Look around. Most people feel a lot better, right? I think with seasickness, aside from people that have that inner ear issue, that true inner ear issue, motion sickness prone, most people can pull themselves out of it. They might get in the rut, but they can pull themselves out of it, right? Or they have some element of discomfort that they don't want to talk about or advertise, but that's really the issue. They're not really seasick. Their stomach doesn't feel right. They woke up really late. They didn't sleep well. Maybe they drank too much the night before. They ate a big greasy cheeseburger, and they're just off.
Yeah.
So they got to figure it out. And that goes back to one of my points earlier. It's just dealing with discomfort. Have a club soda. Maybe you should have a water. Maybe the third coffee isn't a good idea, right? Let's thinking through it. Put something in your stomach. Oh, you're acidy? Okay, take a Tums.
Makes sense.
Have a ginger ale. And now, I've had people jump in the water and feel much better. We don't do that on charters, but I've seen that work. I don't know that I advocate for that, but...
Really? So if you're
I've heard that.
I never heard that.
Yeah, I've heard that. Because, I mean, we've dealt with it with some buddies that I want to go tuna fishing, and they wanted it so bad, and they couldn't get out of the beanbag, and they were just green, and I felt so bad for them.
Dude, if they went over, it was super rough that day too. If
Yeah.
anybody
We
went
would have
over
lost
swim,
them.
It changes your
We lost
equilibrium.
the tuna.
our departures would not equal arrivals. It'd be a fraction coming in.
Yeah, I mean, it changes your equilibrium, so
Yeah.
sometimes that's what people need to get back into the game.
It's a good tip, man.
That's a good one.
Where it's feasible. I'm not going to cannonball off a head boat.
Well, I mean, there's a lot more sharks now around, too. I don't know that I like to be on top of the water, not in it. I don't know that I would necessarily take that risk myself.
So you did mention that sharks were a bigger part of your program back when you could actually keep the Makos.
Mm-hmm.
Since Makos have been prohibited to keep, have you seen more of them? Have you seen the Makos bounce back at all?
So I haven't spent the same volume of time out there that I used to in the last 3 years or so. But, I think we see more Makos, but I also don't think we necessarily have a great data set. That science is flawed, by and large. And not to get into the publicized topic of Mako science, but it is flawed science. They really don't truly know what's going on there. There's some very interesting political ramifications happening in those European fisheries. That would be eye-opening to the average individual on shark regulations. But I think that sharks overall, you're seeing more and more of them, and that's something that's happening through the Gulf at all, right?
Something a lot of anglers are like voicing their, look what I'm seeing.
Right. And so we don't really know how that's going to shake out, right? Shark longlining as a whole is pretty much done in the U.S. I can't speak the same for Mexico, and I really don't know what's going on in Canada.
Yeah.
Yeah, but we're seeing, I mean, the shark populations that have exploded have been sandbar sharks. I'm sure dusky sharks, I heard the guys are seeing more of offshore, but the brown sharks are just, I mean, they're a nuisance to striper guys. They're popping up on the tuna grounds. I remember we went on a trip last year. We went out to where there'd been a ton of bluefin, dropped 4 jigs to the bottom, 4 sharks on.
Right.
And it's, you know, we spent an hour trying to run away from them. You know, how many rounds do you want to feed to brown sharks before?
Got to keep the tackle shops busy, right?
But yeah, the reason I asked about the Makos is what I didn't realize, I just recently learned, is that in California, in the Pacific, you can keep, it's a limit of like multiple sharks per day per person.
Really?
For Makos. So they have no, now don't quote me on, they don't go out and keep 2 Mako sharks, but I think it's much, they're still keeping them, and they're still keeping more than I think we ever did. Which I felt that was interesting. They must have a lot more Makos out there. I mean, it's also not managed by ICAT, which, you know, I think we deal with a whole different set of regulatory issues here, where we kind of look at the sharks and the tuna as a shared resource with, you know, with Europe.
Sounds like your next podcast topic.
You have to be feeling pretty good as a guy that skews towards tuna fish with the state of the bluefin, fishery, even well beyond where you're going to go fish for them. I mean, they're popping up in areas that they've been absent from for decades. It's got to be a pretty good feeling for the future of bluefin, immediate future of bluefin fishing.
I think it's great for everyone,
Yeah.
too. I mean, you have boat brokers, tackle shops, guides that have been able to start businesses, hobbyist fishermen, and it's just a great fishery. It's probably toughest on the commercial bluefin fishing because there's so many.
Yep.
But that's a whole other separate topic. But strictly from a recreational perspective, I think it's great for everyone. And yes, we've had positive upside. And there were years where the bluefins kind of saved us, right? In the canyon or midshore, which were great. I mean, it's a great, healthy fishery. And quite frankly, I think like when you look at the regulatory limit, 3 smaller fish and an over for a charter boat, I mean, that's a nice catch.
Yeah.
That's a really nice catch. You don't maybe need to catch 10 bluefins to you feel like you had a great day. Like that rec limit, even 2 unders in and over. I mean, that's a spectacular setup.
It's a nice haul.
It's a lot of product. It's great.
Yep.
And one of the nicer changes to the regulations too is they did open them up a little bit in the last couple of years, but headboats were under the same regulations where you could keep, 3 unders and 1 over, but now it's up to 15. So now there's a, if there is no offshore canyon bite, can go to the midshore grounds on a headboat and do it, and not just have to watch one guy go home with all the sushi.
It's definitely great for those boats, and I think that it's their regulatory attempt at keeping it relatively open access, right? Giving those guys an opportunity to fish, which they've suffered in the long term with different regulation. Well, it changes.
Take your captain hat off for a minute. As an angler, what do you have out ahead on your bucket list? That you mentioned you were in Costa Rica, you got your first blue marlin. You have anything in the Northeast that's high on your bucket list to check off?
So I think it would be super, super interesting to catch a giant trophy white marlin, right? To watch that.
How big? Where's trophy start for white marlin for you?
Let's just call it 80 pounds, right?
Okay.
I think that would be cool. But I don't really look at it as a numeric mark, right? I'd like to go and experience that fishery with a top, best-in-class team and watch how they do it. I think that's super fascinating. I caught the blue marlin in Costa Rica, but it'd be cool to do that in the Northeast or the Mid-Atlantic. But it's so different, right? I don't necessarily focus strictly on I have to have this one catch.
Sure.
Just an experience. And I really like to see the decision-making process. Watching those different anglers, crews, and how they go fishing throughout the day. That, to me, is fascinating. That's what always piqued my interest in the fishing. It was never the actual mechanical process of it, just watching all those variables and sorting through it.
I like it.
Yeah, when I try to explain to people what I love about fishing, like that's, it's this giant puzzle. You've got all these pieces to a puzzle, but it's incomplete. It's not every piece, but you've got to put them together and try to get some sort of a picture out of it. And that's what keeps it interesting trip after trip.
Absolutely, and that changes too throughout the fisherman's life cycle, right? I think that's important. When I was a mate, all I wanted to do was go chunk a tuna because I could participate. Then it became something greater, right? And that you just keep ascending. And as a captain, like I remember one fisherman always telling me, well, the best captains never touch the rods. That's interesting because the very best giant tuna fisherman I ever worked for would never allow anyone to do anything. You were strictly hired from the neck down. Everyone has a different philosophy in it.
Sure.
But I find that to be very interesting to see as you ascend, different variables become important.
Now, where did you do most of your giant tuna fishing?
I've done it through North Carolina, through Maine, Massachusetts, Long Island, Jersey.
Was there a particular, if you had to choose one of those fisheries, which one did you like the most? Outer Banks, where it was more trolling? Maine, I assume you're drifting big live baits.
I think the Outer Banks trolling was a fascinating learning curve for me. It's probably where I learned the most as a fisherman and as a captain on how to pursue a fish because you were learning water and you could take those same skills and apply them to other areas, right? So in the Northeast, or if you go off Morehead City and you're doing like king mackerel jigging, or you're looking for blue marlin, or you're looking for giant tunas off Morehead, right? You're fishing water breakdown. You learn how to do that. And then strictly from a fishing perspective, I think fishing Cape Cod or George's Banks probably some of the most interesting fishing when you're fishing bait. And as a mate, you're much more involved and you're physically catching bait all trip. Like that is the most important thing to be doing. It's not really where you suspend the baits. It's about having that quality bait and learning those subtle nuances.
Yeah, George's Bank is somewhere that's high on my list to get out to. It doesn't make sense to go there anymore because the tuna fishing's so good, so close. You can't keep multiple fish if you're going to sell them. So, I mean, it's such a long run, but it just sounded like, you've been out there to George's, it sounded like an absolute paradise,
It was interesting. You have your good trips, you have your slow trips, but even, as you go fish off Jefferies or some of the P-Town, all those different areas all have those subtle nuances of fishing. And so you'll learn what works, and what worked today doesn't always mean it's going to work tomorrow.
Do you have a choice bait? I know it's the one that they're eating, but is it one you have a little bit more confidence in than another one?
I think that whatever bait we're fishing, I want to make sure it's best in class bait, right? Whether it's a fresh bluefish or fresh bunker or best ballyhoo. That all makes a huge difference, right? Whether you're trolling or just drifting baits, you've got to have top of the line everything. Fresh leaders, fresh hooks, fresh main line, quality gear, because that all does make a huge difference. I mean, we've lost fish every which way possible. I'm sure we'll find another way to lose a fish, right? But just making sure all the gear is on the up and up is so important. And, fishing will teach you not to be cheap, right? Very quickly will those guys get whittled out quickly.
Yeah.
That is it's like buy it multiple times at a cheaper price or buy it once buy the right thing once at the right, at a higher price. That's every fisherman goes through that lesson.
Totally. And we've all been there too. And what's interesting now is going back to the information flow. You now have the ability to learn that lesson probably on the most minimal level possible. Versus when you're just getting into it, you don't know, and you're making some sort of capital allocation to buy a reel because it might fit your budget where, hey, maybe you just save up a little bit more and you go buy the right equipment next time. Or you don't cheap out and buy one skein of leader, you go buy 3. Because what happens if it falls in the water? And now you're fishing with lighter leader or heavy leader and you're not getting bites.
What's the biggest disaster you've seen on a charter operation where, I don't know, the mate dropped something crucial over the side or something? Any like, well, I'll never have one of those ever again.
I've been super fortunate. I haven't had crazy situations ensue where we've had complete travesty. What we've had are weak links that get discovered quickly.
Yeah.
This summer I had an angler who actually tore his back muscles. We were in a tournament and we had to disqualify the fish. Like, you can't make it up.
Yeah.
But you learn in this boat yacht world, nothing will surprise you. You can't make it up. And even if you got creative with the imagination, something will happen. But consequently, in that same tournament, we still came in 3rd place because we pulled something out of the rabbit hat on the last day. So we went from what would have been 1st place fish to 2nd place fish.
So that got DQ'd because that angler had to tap out and somebody else had to touch the rod? Is that
the rod touched the gunnel, and at that point we made a community decision that the fish is going to be disqualified.
Yeah.
stuff just happens in life, right? And that was fishing rough weather. We were fishing 20 to 25, gusts to 30. Like, it was big, just really, really big. And we got the bite at 11 o'clock. I looked down in the cockpit, not a soul's there. And I'm like, wow, guess this is what's going to happen. Everybody comes out, and they were eating sandwiches, staying nourished.
What was the fish?
It's a big eye.
Oh.
But that's okay. I mean, the show goes on. People ask me after, like, were you pissed? I'm like, no, you just keep going forward. There are many times where rods are peeling and no one's left, around, or I can't reel any more fishing. Okay. It's fine. Probably say, like, the most memorable, disappointing fish that I've ever lost was a fish I fought for 12 and a half hours. It was in October. And we ended up getting to the canyon. We had some yellow fins, caught a nice sword right off the bat. We put the bait back down. I went to go lay down. And my mate's like, yo, we're on, dude. I'm like, all right, cool. And I had this, like, Hercules mate with me at the time, this kid, John. He was a good mate. Super strong, subhuman strength. And so we're fishing, and, like, we're sitting there, and for 3 hours, this thing would just take us around in circles. And then it went straight down 600 feet and just sat. I was like, whoa, dude, this is big. This is sick. So we start playing the fish. Charter's like, yeah, we're good, man. We're just going to go inside. Okay. Just me and my mate for the rest of it. We ended up drifting from the east side of the Hudson to 5 miles west of the West Elbow. Just straight through it. Finally, at 12:30, we were putting so much drag, we kept marking it at 100 feet. We never saw it. We assume it was a big sword, only because we had just caught a sword a few hours before, and we'd been catching swords in that particular depth. And the line just parted. Just zipped around, and the friction of the water cut the main line. Oh. 130-pound mono. There was so much drag, it was spool all the way, preset all the way up, full sunset, just clamped the spool, because at that point we had nothing else we could do.
Yeah.
And I think to myself, is there a way I could have put like a tuna claw or something on it? And I couldn't do that because I had crimped the light in the mono, and I was trying a different technique. And I was like, this is where it's going to come and bite you.
So tuna claws are the... Can you describe what a tuna claw is?
Yeah, it's just like a giant hook you can slide down the main line. The longliners use them, or you can rig up a harpoon and send it down, like 2 carabiners. Like, dude, you just got to try something different at that point. But because I didn't use floss, I was like, I'll never cut it. I'll never cut the lead. Yeah. It's kind of like, whatever.
Now, was that the end of you crimping on the lights after that?
Yeah, that was the last trip of the season, too. It was a COVID year. It was cool. We went back inshore, and Adam called me. He's like, what are you doing? I'm like, oh, we're just fishing. It's like, dude, you're on hour 40. I'm like, yeah, but we're not going to go back out, so we'll go fishing for longer. And we did a quick drift. We caught, like, 6 fish. And they're like, can we go in now? I'm like, yeah, absolutely. You should have just told me that. We went in. It was nice. Box full of yellowfin, sword.
Oh. Man, well, I'm excited for the tuna season to get going. When's the Canyon Runners' first trip? This podcast will probably hit, what, mid-May?
Probably.
So by then, I imagine the Canyon Runner will have made its first canyon trip by the time this goes out there.
Yeah, so the boat will start fishing mid-May, or excuse me, Memorial Day weekend.
Okay.
Yeah, and it's been great, and you guys have been an awesome advertising sponsor, so it's been super fun to do this and actually see everyone and what the products you guys are building. It's awesome.
Yeah, you can hear more of Deane and Adam every week starting in mid-June on our offshore fishing reports. You guys bring the actual legitimacy to it while Cheech and I goof around and talk about jigging and popping and failing and doing all the losing fish all those ways you were talking about.
They're in the Inshore report. You guys came to market with a new iteration of the virtual captain system that brought that inshore. You want to touch on kind of how you started with the offshore routes and what the difference between the inshore one and the offshore one is?
Yeah, so that's the inshore product that we have out now. It's 2 different layers. It's just a regular layer where we track you and you can see some weather. And then we have a second tier product where you get more features, you're able to see other boats and where they're fishing, and you get community notes. So you're able to get those reports of what those particular fishermen are doing in those given areas. And it's been interesting to watch that striper migration as they've started to ascend out and work their way to the east. And we're starting also to hear now some boats locally that found some fish in the ocean. So maybe we'll see some early stripers being caught. locally in the oceans, which would be good for the charter fleet
Yeah.
as a whole.
Yeah, a couple years ago we saw that some of the guys got on fish on their way into the Raritan Bay out in the ocean. They were following sea herring, and I think it was just a matter of like there was a boat that was moving at the time. They were moving their boat between inlets, found that school of fish, and the guys had them for a couple weeks. But it's like you said, if there's nobody out there to see them, then that school of fish goes completely unnoticed. So Shimano is rods and reels for every fishery in the Northeast, whether it's deep dropping the swordfish in the canyons, casting the stripers in the surf, or finessing panfish through the ice. That's about as wide a range of fishing applications as you're going to get. For inshore saltwater applications, the workhorse of the Shimano lineup is the Spheros SW combo. The Spheros SW is built with premium Shimano technologies like Infinity Drive, which increases cranking power and smoothness while fighting fish. The rods range from a 7-foot medium heavy to a 9-foot heavy and fit Spheros SW sizes from 5,000 to 8,000 for a range of lure and bait fishing. From the surf this past season, I used the Ultegra XR 14,000 XSD paired with the Shimano Tierlejo XX surf rod. The Ultegra XR is Shimano's most feature-packed surf reel to date, with the rigid cast spool support to stabilize the spool while casting heavy lures, Infinity Drive to increase winding power under pressure, and X-Protect technology to provide high-level water resistance. The Tierlejo XX is built for casting distance and durability. The 10'6", 1 to 3 ounce model was perfect for punching Ava jigs through the wind during a sand eel bite in New Jersey last fall, and it was great for throwing pencil poppers to distant bluefish off the south side of Cape Cod. It's become my go-to combo when casting distance makes the difference in the surf. No matter what you're fishing for in the Northeast, Shimano has a rod and reel for it. To pick out your next setup, visit fish.shimano.com.
I think a recurrent theme has been the importance of making the right call on weather. Talk about real quick, because I thought this was a really cool little wrinkle where everybody's mind goes to, all right, how's this going to help me catch more fish? But the weather features from the virtual captain system, how does that all work?
So we have different layers of weather, different forecasts, and that forecast map allows you to see air pressure, barometer, gives you some wind and rain and precipitation and lightning, and so it shows you what's going to happen on a macro level, right? So if you're getting if you look at the land forecast and it's 70 degrees, you're probably going to have some sort of version of southwest or southern wind, right? Which will show you that as that water warms up, you should see more and more active striped bass coming out of those rivers moving east, right? And if you're seeing conversely that a lot of the north wind, it probably line up with your land forecast that it's going to be slightly cooler temperatures, right? And the start of any good fishing trip is always hinged on the weather, right? You need to really understand the forecast so that you can get comfortable with those given conditions and you will be able to produce.
I like it. You got anything else, Jimmy?
I don't.
Deane, you have anything else you wanted to explore with us today?
No, I just want to say thank you. This was awesome.
It was cool. Awesome having you over, man.
Yeah, thanks for coming up.